Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really getting into something extraordinary. We're looking at a moment of collective defiance inside Iran, specifically inside its prisons. An act that, well, it forced the regime to blink, at least for a moment.
That's right. We're diving into the really intense situation recently at Qezel Hesar Prison, the main event, a 6-day continuous hunger strike. And not just a few people, 1,500 death row prisoners acting together.
1,500. That scale is incredible.
It is. And crucially, their families were protesting outside, in the streets. That combination, that pressure, it forced the regime to, let's say, take a step back regarding the 6 prisoners who were sort of the immediate trigger.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our aim today is to understand the political weight behind this strike by supposedly ordinary prisoners. How does it connect to the bigger picture of resistance in Iran? And maybe most importantly, why do the sources we're looking at say this temporary retreat, this promise from the regime, just can't be trusted?
Exactly. And that first point is fascinating, the identity of these 1,500 strikers. Officially, they're labeled non-political offenders. But the analysis we've seen argues this strike was maybe the most political act possible given the circumstances.
Because of the sheer risk involved.
Precisely. And it did lead to a small, immediate win for those 6 individuals. They were moved out of solitary, off death row for the moment, back to general population.
But, and this is a huge but, in the material we reviewed, that small step back came alongside something truly horrific happening elsewhere.
Yes, it's a critical contrast. While the focus was on Qezel Hesar, the regime simultaneously executed 56 other prisoners in different cities, places like Mashhad, Kermanshah, Tabriz, all within that same week, October 15th to 21st.
56 people.
56, including 2 women and 1 young man who was arrested as a juvenile at just 17. I mean, you do the math, that's basically 1 execution every 3 hours during that period.
Just let that sink in. It underscores that state terror isn't some side effect. It is the strategy. So how did these 1,500 people facing that reality find the nerve, the coordination for a 6-day strike? It can't have just popped up out of nowhere?
No, definitely not. The analysis connects it directly to this growing spirit of resistance, both inside and outside the prisons. It's seen as building on, maybe even upgrading the No to Execution Tuesdays campaign.
Ah, right. The weekly protests initiated by political prisoners.
Yes, which had just marked its 90th week around that time. The idea is that the courage and persistence shown by the political prisoners kind of seeped into the general prison population, inspiring these so-called non-political inmates.
So it's like the resistance inside and outside started feeding off each other. I thought the slogan mentioned in the sources was really powerful, the one that apparently started outside but was heard inside the prisons.
Oh, yeah. Bending the head is forbidden, and the executioner's noose on the neck of Damavand is no longer effective. Damavand being the highest peak in Iran, a national symbol.
It's like saying your ultimate threat, your ultimate symbol of power, it doesn't scare us anymore.
Exactly. It signals a psychological shift. Which brings us back to that core question. Why is this action by ordinary criminals seen as so deeply political?
Yeah, I mean, if someone's in for theft, or maybe drug charges, how does refusing food become a political act in the regime's eyes or in the analyst's eyes?
Well, the argument presented is that in Iran today, the line between political and non-political crime is basically blurred to non-existence. Standard crimes, things like theft, poverty-driven offenses, they're seen as the direct result of the regime's own corruption and mismanagement.
Okay, so the regime creates the desperate conditions.
Right, it closes off paths to an honorable life because of the political and economic mess it's made. So the crimes that emerge are, in a sense, symptoms of the political disease, and the punishment is therefore political too.
Which explains why Iran has the highest execution rate per capita globally. It's not just about justice, is it?
Not according to these analyses. It's primarily a tool, a political tool to maintain fear, to keep society atomized and terrified. The goal is to crush any potential for broader social or political demands before they even start.
It sounds like they're trapped.
Yeah.
The sources use this term, ben bast, a deadlock, an impasse. Can you explain that a bit more? Why deadlock?
It's a real catch-22 for them. If they stop the executions, the fear evaporates. And people like Khamenei reportedly worry the whole system could just dissolve overnight. They see executions as, and this is a quote, the only way to escape the wrath of the masses.
So stopping is regime suicide.
Pretty much. But the other side of this bombast, this deadlock, is that continuing executions, especially at this pace, is like constantly pouring gasoline on a smoldering fire. Every execution creates more anger, more resentment, potentially more future resistance.
So they're just constantly trying to manage this impossible balance, tighten here, loosen there.
Exactly. Trying to figure out how much terror is just enough without causing a full-blown explosion. It's a perpetual crisis management mode.
Which brings us back to the promise they made regarding those 6 prisoners at Qezel Hesar. They hinted at maybe changing the penal code or a 6-month halt. Given what you just said about needing terror, how reliable is that?
The expert consensus is zero reliability, absolutely none. The regime, the argument goes, only respects Zor force. Promises are tactics, distractions. They might allow a concert, push some nationalist slogans, anything to distract the gray masses, as they apparently call them, while the killing machine keeps running.
So if promises mean nothing, what did make them back down, even just for those 6 people in that one instance?
Pure pressure, organized and visible. The analysts point to the global campaigns, the justice movement, and specifically those very public protests in European and American cities led by resistance supporters.
Ah, the international dimension.
Yes, plus the outcry around the world day against the death penalty, over 520 prominent figures speaking out. That kind of coordinated global attention makes the regime look bad, makes the executions politically costly on the international stage.
And the sources are really clear about the danger of the opposite silence from the outside world.
Yeah, they frame the policy of appeasement, Momoshat, as basically giving fuel to the regime's suppression machine. Silence is seen as enabling the terror, letting them get away with it.
Now, the analysts also suggest this internal pressure cooker isn't happening in isolation. There are strategic problems outside Iran that are weakening the regime too.
That's a crucial link. The commentary talks about the weakening of key regional allies, or proxies Assad in Syria, Hezbollah, Hamas. Losing influence there is described as a major strategic strike against Tehran.
Because their own leaders, like Khamenei, used to say that fighting there was their strategic depth.
Exactly. The idea was better to fight them in Lebanon and Syria than have to fight dissent in the streets of Tehran or Hamadan. It was a buffer.
And now that buffer is eroding.
Significantly. So the regime is forced to confront its own population more directly on its own soil. This hunger strike then becomes a kind of tactical upgrade for the resistance, bringing the fight right into the prisons and mobilizing the families, the grassroots, outside.
The analysis about the dynamic changing between the prisoners and the guards, the inmate versus warden, I found that really striking. What's shifting there?
It points towards an erosion within the regime's own enforcement apparatus. The guards, the wardens, they're living in the same collapsing economy, seeing the same corruption. They're part of the same disillusioned society.
So the argument is it gets harder for them to enforce the terror.
Yeah, the idea is the executioner's blade gets duller when the people wielding it see the regime weakening, see its lack of a future, and maybe see the humanity in the prisoners they're guarding, their own loyalty waivers.
Now, while there was broad support for these prisoners globally, the sources did point out a kind of, well, maybe troubling contrast in how some opposition figures reacted.
Yes, this was quite specific. The critique focused on certain figures associated with Reza Pahlavi. One advisor was highlighted for actually criticizing Israel for not having the death penalty, implying it would be necessary in a future Iran.
Wow.
And Pahlavi himself, the analysis notes, was silent on this specific issue during the crisis and hasn't included a clear abolition of the death penalty in his proposed plans.
Which seems completely at odds with what the prisoners themselves said they were striking for. What did their collective statement actually say?
It was incredibly direct and, yes, very political. They put out this collective testament, and I think it's worth quoting. We went on strike for water, for bread, for an end to poverty, for the right to life, and for freedom, 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 repeating it 3 times like that.
There's no doubt about their motivation. It wasn't just about their own sentences.
Not at all. It was about fundamental dignity, the right to a decent life, and political freedom.
Which raises the question again. If these aren't your typical political prisoners, how does this spirit of resistance, this muqawamat, actually spread and organize them?
The sources talk about moral influence, like a magnet. Information gets in, sometimes via smuggled phones, but it's also the example set by long-term political prisoners. People like Saeed Missouri, who've endured decades for their beliefs.
Their dedication acts as a kind of inspiration.
Exactly. When the quote-unquote ordinary prisoners see the selflessness, the commitment to freedom of these political inmates, maybe sharing food when they have little themselves, refusing to break under pressure, it draws them in. It shows them a different way, a reason to resist beyond just personal survival.
It's about character and unity winning out over fear.
That seems to be the core message.
So bringing it all together, what's the final conclusion from these analyses? What's the only way, according to them, to actually end the death penalty in Iran for good?
The bottom line in the material we reviewed is pretty stark. It requires the overthrow of the regime, and crucially, standing firm on the principle of neither Shah nor Sheikh.
Meaning no return to any kind of dictatorship.
Precisely. Because any dictatorship, the argument goes, inevitably brings back torture, suppression, and likely the death penalty. So the fight has to be for genuine democratic change, not just swapping one autocrat for another.
So the big takeaway from Qezel Hesar, even with its limited temporary success, is the absolute necessity of organized, unified resistance. Muqawamat.
Yeah. And that points to the final thought, the provocative question, really, that we should leave you, the listener, with.
Good.
If 1,500 prisoners facing imminent death in the most brutal conditions could force the regime back even one step, just through unity and organized action, what does that say about the potential? What level of courage, what level of organization is needed from everyone outside those walls to win permanent freedom and finally abolish this practice entirely?
That organization, the Sazman Yaftagi, is key. The analysis suggests all the energy, all the desire for freedom needs to be channeled into effective structures, like the resistance units, the Kanun Ha-Yishureshi.
Right. The passion needs a plan. The spirit needs structure.
That's a powerful place to end. Thank you for walking us through this incredible story of defiance and its implications.
Thank you. It was important to discuss.